Welcome everyone to the Criterion Cut, your prestigious Patreon exclusive show where we talk about films from the Criterion collection. This month's feature film was a vote winner. We had a vote for 3 samurai films, none of which were Kurosawa. It was very specifically chosen to not be that, because we've got Kurosawa scheduled every so often. So the winner, beating out Harikiri and Three Outlaw Samurai, was Samurai Rebellion, which is what we're now doing today. The only one of the 3 that I hadn't seen before, so that was kind of nice, I guess. I get to watch
lucky you.
Watch a movie. Actually, something I did not realize when I put these on the vote together is that the director of this, Masaki Kobayashi, is actually the director of Harikiri as well. I didn't notice that.
Oh.
Yeah, this is actually kind of a big director in Japan. He did the Human Condition trilogy, which I've not seen, but it is in the Criterion collection, so
eventually we'll get
to that. He did a horror movie called Kwiden, I think it's pronounced, from 1964, which I think was nominated for an Oscar. So he's got a lot of big movies. Like there's a good chance, if it's not Kurosawa from like 50s, 60s Japan, that's prominent and well regarded, it might be this guy. He's kind of the next one there. So yeah, interesting. But Toshiro Mifune is in this movie, which is a staple.
It is a samurai movie. I mean, at this point, he's like the samurai guy for everything that we've really gone through.
He is very much. He's very prolific in this era of Japanese cinema. So we got him there. Of course, we'll start spoiler free as we tend to do here, and we'll get into things. The premise of this one is that Toshiro Mifune plays a character in Isaburo, who is this loyal samurai who's got kind of a dull job working for his lord, right? Because this is during Japan time when everyone had a lord, right?
It's like 1725, I think, is the year we start.
I think that's what it said, yeah. And he has a grown-up son, but he has 2 grown-up sons, and he's got a wife. He's not really in love with his wife. It's kind of a marriage of like arrangement,
like power and status and such.
It's all, so he's very kind of disillusioned about life in general, and the whole story kicks off when the Lord wants to give away his concubine, who has already mothered a son to him, to Isaburo's oldest son, Yagoro.
Yes.
And everyone feels like, this is bullshit. Why have we been having this woman forced upon us? It's literally his cast off. He's just shoving her aside because he wants to move on to someone else. But it takes some interesting turns from there, where an actual relationship blossoms and further developments from, up on top come down the chain. And, there's further decisions which are not leaving people happy, which, as you might expect, given the title of the movie, might lead to a slight case of rebellion. So that's the basics of it before we get into everything else.
Samurai Rebellion, aka the samurai who was totally cool with everything and definitely didn't do anything against the established order.
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd say about this, just for people who are going into it, is that don't expect a sort of evenly distributed action movie, because all the action's at the end. Like the last 25 minutes, lots of sword fighting, lots of things going on, very well shot stuff, but it is all drama up until that point. It's all about setting up the motivations for why the character's eventually going to draw his sword, and that's very much what the first 90 minutes is. It's a 2-hour movie, and but we'll get into all this stuff. I'll just start with a simple question. David, what did you think of Samurai Rebellion?
I did enjoy it. I don't want it to come across with my pause there that I didn't enjoy it, because it is a very well-made movie. I think that there is a lot of artistry throughout it, and the way that like different shots are composed, there's a deeper meaning to it than just we need to get 2 people on a screen. Like, it's clear that they went in with some sort of a vision. I do feel like maybe it's just my own coming into this not knowing what to expect, but it was kind of a shock to the system that it was so action light for so much of the movie. At a certain point, I get what they were doing. I appreciated it from that point, but it took probably a good hour before I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna hold off, and the fight's only gonna be like the thing at the end there. But no, in regards to everything else, it's a solidly told story. It's definitely one that's more rife with, I don't want to say like political ideology, but it's definitely got some deeper symbolism that is speaking to the culture as a whole in terms of rejecting tradition for what is right and not allowing yourself to be like pushed around by the people in charge if they are clearly the ones in the wrong, sort of things going on. And obviously those sort of things are timeless messages that can apply to really any culture at any time. So no, I think it was good. I think it was a solidly made movie. It's just a little bit of a misnomer having it sandwiched in my mind between things like Seven Samurai and other such samurai films like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I wasn't really sure what I was expecting going in. I think now that I know that this director also did Harikiri, which is just another word for seppuku, which also pops up in this movie.
Yes.
I would say that is the better movie. Harikiri, I remember being kind of blown away with just how well structured that movie was. That said, though, I think this is a really, really solid movie that has a lot of restraint and kind of spends its time really sort of like getting into the characters. And while there's definitely a point in the movie where it almost feels like Yogoro, the son, who has been forced to marry the cast off from the Lord. It almost feels like he might become the main character, but ultimately is Izaburu's story, and everything kind of serves the themes that he brings to the film. There's a whole idea of like him seeing hope in the younger characters that he's lost for himself, and it kind of reignites his fire for life, and it's why he's willing to even fight back at all, never mind what he does by the end of the movie. So I think that stuff is wonderfully done. I think there's some really great directing moments. The opening shots of the movie are after the opening titles, which play out to some intense drum beats. That we get effectively it's like a standoff scene, but all it is it's Toshiro Mifune. He's got his sword drawn, and there's like a dummy, and we find out in like 30 seconds later that this is like him testing a new sword, and he's giving it he's okay to say, hey, yeah, it's pretty good, cut's good, but the way this is shot with the music, which is kind of eerie, and it's almost like the start of 2001, where the camera tracks into the monolith. It tracks into this dummy, this straw dummy that's sitting there, and the music's kind of and it sort of builds up to him eventually slicing it. And it's, again, like we said, there's really no action, unless you count this, until the last 30 minutes of the movie. But this really sets this tone of like it's going to be a big deal when it happens because it's been treated with such reverence. And I think that eeriness to it, which I don't think I've seen in a samurai movie before, is the idea that, oh no, the sword fighting is eerie. I've seen it portrayed as exciting. I've seen it portrayed as desperate. I've seen it portrayed as, everything in between those two things. But I don't think I've ever quite got, this is eerie and we're kind of like going to no man's land in your mind to actually do it. And I kind of appreciated that as a unique touch that this movie had.
Yeah, no, I get that. And also, just that opening sequence, I really do appreciate the idea that they set in your mind, this is essentially a time of peace. There is no like major conflict or major war that's been going on in any recent history. So everyone's just kind of calm and chill and whatnot. But it gives that underlying current of like, well, the samurai are a military, essentially. So there's this idea of like, okay, what are these military people going to end up doing by the end of this that's going to disrupt this quote unquote time of peace? And I'll throw in the quote unquote there because obviously while this is a time of peace for like the land as a whole, they establish very quickly on that like nobody's happy with the Lord. No one's happy with the daimyo right now. And as much as it's not like a warring state, they are very much under his thumb.
Yeah, well, I think to extrapolate from that, I would say that it's this idea that, okay, it's technically a time of peace because the different tribes and clans or whatever we're calling them in this time period aren't fighting each other, but it turns out that life within those clans is actually pretty dire because of the way that everyone's expected to follow the Lord, and what he says goes, and you have to accept it no matter what. And there's this such sense of decorum to every chain of command that goes down the line, and how you're supposed to respond. And that's a lot of what this movie's kind of fighting back against, is that when the time comes when the person in charge makes a decision where you go, you know what, no, that's not right, like that's actually a really shitty decision, do you stand up against that? And that's what this movie is ultimately getting at. So, and it maybe even suggests this idea that if the samurai are there to fight the fight that's worth fighting, then by the end of the movie, our lead character finds the fight that he thinks is worth fighting in a time that is supposedly peaceful. So there's some interesting ideas at play, I think.
Yeah, no, I think the thing that was coming up in my mind, and this might be just because I recently saw it performed on stage, is Fiddler on the Roof. Not in how it resolves, because it resolves in a very different way, but just the themes that keep on coming up over and over again are, again, this idea of following the way things have been, following order, stuff like that, and then being able to recognize when it's wrong in just like how life should be sort of sense. Not even wrong on like a personal level, but just wrong on like, no, humanity is not meant to live like that sort of stasis that they're trying to reinforce there.
Yeah, and there's even a few other things that feel a little taboo for, not that when the movie was made so much, but for when the movie's set. Like this idea of a woman being married off after she's already had a child with someone. Clearly, that's not something that people were thrilled about the idea of in this time period. You know, I think even by the time this movie was made in the 60s, there was more of an acceptance of that kind of thing, of someone remarrying after having kids. But certainly when you think of stories set in this sort of time frame, you think of people going for young brides who are untouched and things like that, because that's what was seen as, I don't know, desirable or what someone in power deserved, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think that you said it best at the beginning there when I mean, the movie calls her this as well, but she essentially is the cast-off. She's this idea of, oh, it's a hand-me-down, more or less. You don't get to choose your own wife. You don't get to even have somebody who is, as you're saying, untouched or whatever. It's you have this person above you saying, you have to do this, so you're going to do this.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I think the movie plays with all these themes really well. It builds up. I think the pacing is pretty solid. I mean, despite the fact that there is no action, I think once you do get the grasp of, no, this is what this movie is, it's building. And there's these little moments, and I think the director here, he loves a good track-in shot when a character's about to say something important. Because there's multiple times when someone's about to say something defiant for the first time, where the camera will track in, and you know from the language of the filmmaking, they're about to effectively say, piss off. And you're kind of excited every time the camera tracks in because of that. Like, it's really effective. It works quite well. So...
There's also another shot that's used pretty frequently here that I've noticed, which was, I'm just going to call it a crane shot, despite the fact that I'm pretty sure back then they would have just been up on the roof or something, where it is just a bird's eye view looking down on a character. And it's almost always when they're walking in like the Zen garden area that they've got going on, which has its own implications, but also when they're in a room talking to someone else, like, you know, they kneel on the floor and talk, but they only ever show the one person in frame. They show them separated out as if like, give your focus to them because this is important for them right now.
Also makes them feel alone as well, and even if there's technically other people there, because you're getting a shot that's kind of wide but without anyone else in it, it gives it this sense of emptiness around them. So, yeah, spoilers then.
I mean, yeah, I can't say I really noticed any of the score. It was there, but I don't think it really stood out as incredible to me. It fit the scenes. It wasn't anything like huge though.
It's of the era, and certainly of these types of movies. Because I wouldn't say I noticed the score in a lot of these movies from this era. It's very tends to be very similar kind of music. It tends to be very kind of like hands off. Like there's still a little bit of texture here or there. Other than the one thing that I did point out already though is that eeriness to the opening, and that does come back in part of the final fight as well. Which the final standoff, if you want to call it that, is got that feel to it as well. It feels like the planets are about to collide. That's how epic it feels because of the shots and because of the music. So, yeah. Yep. All right, so spoilers then. You know, we're getting to spoilers quite quickly here because I do feel like a lot of what there is to say about this movie is about its themes, how it tackles it, and more importantly, the dilemmas the characters are put in front of, because they're given these incredibly shitty choices repeatedly, and even when one of them early on turns out to have a happy outcome, then immediately there's shitty choices that come later that try to take that happiness away again, and it's
it's not a matter of whether or not it has a good outcome in the end. It's that they don't have the choice. They're not given their own free will to do the things that they want to do. They're told from above, here's what you have to do. And whether or not it ends up well, it's just the sort of thing of like, well, that's not, are we really even living at that point if someone else just tells us who we even have to love?
Well, yeah, but I think part of the point is that despite how they get there, they do end up having feelings for each other, and at that point it becomes worth fighting for. So it doesn't really change what their motivation is at that point in the movie.
Oh no, I'm not saying their motivation. I'm saying that it builds up even from the beginning of this sort of resentment for the power structures. It builds up this idea even from the beginning of, okay, even if it turned out well, you forced this on us. And as much as we like it, we're not going to forget the fact that we didn't have a choice in that matter, that you were the one who said this had to happen.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think, though, it's also doing this thing where it's almost there's this relief that it worked out well. It's like, you know what? That was shitty that this was forced upon us, but it worked out. And the real cruel irony is the second that it's an inconvenience to the person in charge that this is the status quo again, it's immediately they start to take it back. They say, no, she has to come back now. Like, you know, so the movie at the start introduces our main character of Izaburo Sasahara, right?
Sasahara, yeah.
Sasahara. Izaburo. I'll just say the first time. It's easier.
Yeah.
Right? And also his friend, who's kind of like the only person who's kind of on his level skill-wise to kind of set that up. And he even mentions at the start, oh, this peacetime so boring. Like, there's never any real swords fights. Come on, what are we doing here? But, you know, we get some of our opening conversations out of these two, and it's around here when they're walking back that we get the sense of Izaburo looking at the kids like singing in the village and talking about this like festival that's about to happen, this day of celebration that happens every year, and he's talking about what the kids believe this is the day that the gods that bless our crops like leave and they come back, you know, later in the year when it's season again for it. And he's like, you don't really believe that. Well, no, but the kids believe it, and there's this kind of hope to it, and you immediately get this sense of this character who has lost this sense of wonder and hope and doesn't really know what he's fighting for anymore. In fact, one of the first things he says in the movie is that like he wants his son to find someone to marry, but his wife keeps getting in the way because his wife is very picky about who his son should marry, and he just has to stay quiet. And you know, like, and as we learn when we meet the wife, like in every interaction he has with the wife for the rest of the movie, it's not exactly a happy coexistence between them. There's certainly nothing resembling romance there.
Yeah, no, he straight up says over the course of this movie over and over again, it's like, I don't love her, but you guys, you have something, so I'm just going to kind of like live vicariously through you for a little bit here.
I think that's kind of the beauty of it, is that like when eventually Ichi, the woman who's been cast off and is going to marry Yigoro, like when she does come to live with them, right? You know, there's a bit of obviously trying to resist that happening for the first like 20 minutes or whatever. When that does happen and they do end up together, and before long it seems like they're actually starting to feel things for each other and it feels like they're bonding, it does this idea that it kind of does give the main character Izaburo a new sense of like, oh wait, people can actually be happy. Like, I never got this, but I'm glad my son has this, and this is something worth defending. And it feels like as the movie goes on and it's challenged every single time it's challenged, he's there to like prop up his son and his new daughter, because they never use the word in-laws in this movie. It's just very much like, and I'm sure this is a cultural thing where it's just, no, once you're married, the in-laws are your parents too. You refer to them as mother and father and so on.
I feel like it's most likely the female refers to them as the father.
Probably, yeah.
It's probably a thing where, you know, the female then belongs to the husband's family. So But yeah, no, it definitely feels like right before the scene we get the family is told, yes, we have to take her in. They're told that we can't, and they're actually trying to find a way to weasel out of it the whole time. But there's the sequence where the mother character essentially like says what she thinks happened and why they're getting this ex-concubine, and they say,
yeah, it's the first big bit of exposition, and it's interesting to get it from this kind of warped, like really judgmental perspective of this woman who's already judged her, who's like, no,
yeah,
my son's not marrying that little bitch. She's a little crazy person. We can't have that. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but
I at least from what I saw in the movie, she didn't have any reason to like actually believe this. It didn't seem like she had any like info, but she's right. Like everything she said was absolutely right, but it's the difference of framing between the mother character thinking like, oh, she disrespected the Lord by when she saw there was another concubine brought in, she started attacking her and going crazy about it. But then you see the shift in perspective when it's told from her viewpoint of how she was ripped away from, already she had a fiance, she had her entire life planned out, and then it was just torn away from her. And then as this guy decides, I don't want you anymore, like she's just left to go to the side while this newer, younger woman comes in.
Yeah, no, like we get like the wife Suga's perspective, and then when Ichi tells this story to Yugoro later on, you know, because and it sort of does this thing where it's like a story within a story, because Yugoro's talking to his father Izaburo and says, hey, like, because there's a couple of comments before this where like, you know, ever since Ichi come to live with us, she's been such a nice, pleasant woman. She's much better than my wife. It's hard to believe that she did that crazy thing where she slapped them about. Like, what was that? And he asked Yugoro about this, and he's like, yeah, I thought the same thing. So the other day I asked her, and it's sort of like flashbacks to him asking that question, and her face goes very serious. Like, you know, her demeanor changes. She's been very thankful and grateful for, you know, being accepted into the home, well, except by the mother who hates her guts and makes it clear she hates her guts every step of the way.
She tries to do like everything the mother says. Like she's very obedient, trying to help there.
She's doing her best, but her face goes very serious, and she tells the story. And like you say, she tells a very familiar tale, which is she got a messenger saying, "Hey, the Lord's taking a liking to you, so you're going to marry him." And she's like, "I don't want to." But
I'm not even. Did they say marry? I feel like it was just you're going to have his heir.
Oh, sure, you're quite right. I'm filling in blanks because I don't remember the exact dialogue. But you're right. The exact thing was you're going to give him a child because he's an heir. Because one of the things to set up here is that the entire like Lord like clan will fall apart if there's no heir to the current Lord. He does have one son. Yeah. But one, like, that's not hedging your bets. Like, this is a feudal time in Japan. Oh, yeah. He can get killed at any minute. He needs at least a few kids just to guarantee that his legacy will live on. So he wants another kid. He's taking a liking to her. And as you said, she says, but I'm engaged to someone else. And they pressure her. They pressure and say, okay, if that's your concern, if we get your fiancé to agree that you should go with the Lord instead, you'll do it, right? And it's this tight close-up on her face, and she clearly doesn't want to say yes to that. She clearly does not want to do this. But as she says, and she's telling the story to Yugoro in the present-day bit, she's like, I felt pressured, and I was convinced he would never say yes. So
yeah, that's the part that gets me. Like, that's pretty much the setup for her entire plot for the rest of the movie, is she lost her trust in, like, being loved and loving in return, and it's only once she gets back into this family that she starts to redevelop that and being able to trust these people again.
Because you see a follow-up to this where she, after she finds out that apparently he did say yes, she tries to go and talk to her fiancé, and the fiancé's mother won't let her in and says, no, you put that decision on him. And clearly, like, the implication I got from this, it's not that the fiancé's a dick who just said yes without a moment's thought. I get the impression that he was also pressured when the 4 or 5 men came to see him and told him, hey, this is what's happening. So you're going to agree to this, or you're going to stab yourself with your sword, because that's how we do things in this system.
I mean, it is a... obviously this is harder to imagine like modern day, where there isn't like a direct king who can just come into your city and say, you do this for me, and you just have to obey lest you be thrown into jail or killed. But like, you get that idea of there's this lord who had just on a whim, he orders these people around, and everyone just silently knows what the punishment is if you decline. But no one ever like outright says it. Everyone's just like, look, you really should consider saying yes. Just maybe it'll be better for everybody.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, because we're about to get to this part in the story where she actually does hit him, the Lord, that is. Until that scene, I don't think we ever see the Lord until that scene where she walks in and slaps him, because we are actually dealing with middlemen. Like, the actual villains we are talking to throughout the movies, two middlemen. They both had titles, and honestly, I remembered them who they both were individually, visually, but I couldn't tell you for the life of me which one was which name.
They kept on bringing up the titles of stewards and chamberlains.
Yeah, one's one and one's the other, yes.
But like, yeah, I couldn't tell you one way or the other.
Yeah.
But visually, when you see them on screen, you know, like, oh, that's the Lord's guy.
Yeah. So it builds up, and you see, she explains that, okay, I had to go, I didn't want to. A year later, I had a child, right? I gave him a son. I was sent somewhere for postnatal recovery, right?
Like a spa.
Yeah, with the baby. I come back, and there's a woman sitting next to him. And as she describes, as she's telling the story, there wasn't any shame in this woman's face. She was happy to be a mistress. She was happy with the position she's in. And, you know, she'd been ripped from her fiancé, forced to have a child, and the second she's had the kid, he's already cheating on her with someone else. Yep. So... yeah, she freaks out. She goes and hits him. And I think my favorite part of all this...
First he rips out like that girl's hair, more or less. She goes crazy on her first, and then beats him up.
Well, yeah, but my favorite part, though, and this was something that the mother earlier on didn't get right. Like, there was one detail here. Well, it's not so much she got something wrong, but there was a key detail missing, is that the way she told the story earlier, the mother, it just sounded like she just turned around and started hitting the Lord. That's not technically what happened. What actually happened is when she was fighting the other woman, the Lord said, F this, and left the room, and was actually like trying to run away from her down the hall, and she has to chase after him, and when she tries to like sort of just grab his arm and turn him around, he just keeps pushing her away, so she just gets more frustrated and then slaps him in the face. And in complete contrast from how the mother told the story earlier, by the time she slaps him in the face, she's like, yeah, do it again. Do it again. He deserves it. Do it again.
Pretty much. But again, it's that change of perspective. You get someone who is built into the system, who believes that the Lord's order must be followed no matter what, telling the story, and you see it as, oh, she's this shrill, crazy woman who's going to bring nothing but trouble. But then you hear it from her perspective, and you're immediately sympathetic, because... who wouldn't be in that situation?
Yeah, and it's not like the mother who's following the rules and is like really, judgmental about everything. It's not like she seems happy with her life. Like,
no.
Like, are you thrilled with how miserable you are all the time? Like, just being angry at everything around you? Because you don't seem to be.
Like I said, this is a very applicable movie for every age.
But yeah, so we're in this situation where this is clearly where they're really starting to kind of bond, and now she's sort of opened up this, and the big thing that happens at the end of this scene where she's telling this story is she says, look, I never cared about him. I never liked the Lord. I never wanted the Lord. But I did have his son. Technically, I have a child out there. And she basically makes a vow in this scene, but I'm going to forget him because now I'm with you. Now I have to make a fresh start. And I need to, she effectively wants to make something of this life she's now been thrust into. And Yugoro seems like a nice dude, right? He's been very pleasant with her. And she's like, I'm going to choose to forget my son, which is not an easy thing for a mother to do, but she has to because it's the only way she's going to be able to kind of like move on and sort of devote herself to this new life.
Well, that was a bit that we skipped over earlier. Essentially, everyone gets to talking within the Sasahara family, and they come to the conclusion of like, no, we shouldn't have to take on this woman. Like, that's
and
not
just to clarify here, this is Izaburo, his wife, Yugoro, the older son, and then what did I say? Bunzo or Bunzo.
Yes.
who's the younger son.
So they're all talking, and they basically say like, no, we shouldn't have to do this. And I believe he talks to his like samurai partner or rival or whatever. And
He's a frenemy.
Yeah, Tatsuya. And he's basically like, Tadawaki's basically saying like, look, you're not going to be able to get through this by just saying, no, we refuse to take her in. You got to play the defensive. And he relates all this back to sword fighting because everything is about sword fighting. To this.
Which, by the way, everything he says here is how the final fight also goes. Just
yes, absolutely. But he basically says like, look, go on the defensive and then keep doing that until your opponent tires out. So basically just keep on like running defense. So he talks to the steward guy again, and his excuse is essentially like, look, we would not like to have her, not because we're not honored. We totally are, but like, it's too much honor. We couldn't possibly. It's the ex-lord's like mother of his child. That's way too much responsibility for us.
He pulls the Wayne's World card. He says, we're not worthy.
Yeah, pretty much. But the steward is not having it. He's like, look, I know what you're doing. You're declining. He's like, no, I'm not declining. I'm just saying maybe pick someone else. But then as it's obvious it's not going to go his way, the son opens up the panel separating the room and says like, I'll do it. I'll marry her. I mean, it's for the good of everything here. I'll go ahead and do it. So in that moment, he's like, he's a good guy. He's a guy who's willing to do what's right by his family, even if it means his own lack of happiness.
And it's actually during the middle of the movie as well, where Isaburo requests retirement and actually passes over the title of head of the house to his son. He's like, okay, you're taking my duties now, which sounded like a big deal until he explained what they were, and I'm like, oh, it's actually just a pretty dull job you've got, because all he really does is take inventory of all the weapons for the Lord's men and make sure people come in and clean them. It feels like he's just running the cleaning crew for the weapons.
That's such a large part of this movie because, like we said, the action is all concentrated in the last 30 minutes. Honestly, a big thing that I was relating this to is, strangely enough, the Cold War. And I justify that by saying this entire movie is spent essentially in meetings and sending letters to each other of basically trying to get the other person to just back down. Just hold off and stop what you're doing because I don't like what's going on. But because of these letters, they keep on escalating a lot slower than it would have been physically, but it keeps escalating. But the big thing that both sides are trying to avoid is this fight. Because if the Sasaharas go up against the Lord's men, the Sasaharas know that they don't have the strength to fight against the men, so they don't want that to happen or else they'll die. Meanwhile, though, they know the Sasaharas are incredibly skilled sword fighters, and regardless of how long it takes to kill them, it's going to take many dead bodies to get there. Like, a lot of people are going to die. So both sides are trying to avoid this fight in the end, but it's just a lot of, like, meetings and trying to talk to each other until eventually it comes to that tipping point where it's like, all right, this is the only way.
Well, I mean, two things there. One, this did come out in the midst of the Cold War. And two, it maybe just goes back to what you said about this being applicable to any time period in any generation and any group of people, is that you
diplomacy is always the way you want to go, right up until you can't.
Yeah. So, I think that's quite interesting. One of the other things to play with as well is the idea that they're always worried about how this will look to others, not only just in their clan, but also the other clans. And one of the threats that's ultimately made by our main character is that, hey, if you don't, like, I mean, this is later on when the debate is changed by this point in the movie, but he basically sends a letter saying, if we don't resolve this properly, I'm going to tell every other clan in Japan what you have done. And, like, you're going to be looked at as the villain here. And that kind of escalates them to wanting to just kill him, right? Before he can do that. And that's where we get to the final act of the movie. But to get there...
Yes.
We have a bit of a time jump, and, there's a baby girl born named Tommy.
Tommy.
Yeah, Tomi. And it's like, okay, things are going well. The two seem happy.
Nothing has ever been better. I wonder what will happen next.
Well, there's even a scene, this may be before the time jump actually, where Ichi's basically saying she's trying to, like, follow the orders of the mom, And Yugoro's like, don't pay too much attention to her. She's been a miserable old bat forever. My dad's put up with her for 20 years. Like, seriously, it's okay. Like, be you, don't be her. And it cuts to Isaburo, who's actually overhearing some of this. And he comes out and, like, he looks a little bit upset when he's hearing it, like, from around the corner. But it's like, he's like, you know what, he's right. And he comes around and he basically just starts propping her up and, like, giving her, not compliments, but saying how she's doing a good job and, like, you know, like, joking around with both of them and keeping this good atmosphere.
Yeah, I think this was right around the time where he was electing to retire. So he's like, look, no, she's no longer the head, like, woman of the house anymore. Now that your husband has taken over my position, you're the head woman of the house. You don't have to listen to her. You can just do your own thing.
In fact, she has to follow your orders now.
And immediately she's like, no, I don't think I can do that.
I'm scared of her. I'm scared of her. I can't do that.
I'm going to wake up with a few blades in my throat if I do that. So we're just going to let her do what she wants to do as well.
But, I mean, it's also like an old age theme that comes back in a lot of stories, is the idea of the next generation being better. And I think Isaburo sees that in his son and his daughter-in-law. He sees, they're better than we were. And I want them to have a future, which is what makes later... You know, what happens later is even more tragic because of that.
Yeah. It lends in, obviously, I don't know what was going on in, like, 1700s Japan, but this kind of period does lend it to the idea of this older generation of Japan at this point is the post-war generation. They went through this horrific event of World War II, and now their children are becoming adults. Now their children are in, like, their 20s at this point. So it is this idea of they're going out, they're getting their own lives, they're doing what they want, and you want them to be able to not experience the sort of things that you had to go through while you were growing up.
Oh, for sure, yeah. It's all really good stuff. And then out of nowhere, there's like someone running with some news, right? There's, you know, a newsboy runs around saying, "Oh, so and so's been killed." And I didn't remember the name, of course, when they said this because they'd barely been mentioned. Matter. But it's like, no, it's the son that the Lord had already, the one who's an adult. He's died. He got sick and he died, right? Yep. And it's like, oh shit, well, that other baby I had, a couple of years ago with Ichi, right, who's now living with the family, that's now my heir. Oh, well, now she's the mother to the heir, so she kind of needs to come back into the fold and be the actual wife and all that now. Yeah. So we're going to need her back. And that is what the rest of the movie's about, effectively, is them just changing their mind, or the Lord just changing his mind and be like, nope, now we need her back. But by this point, she's had a kid with Iguro. They are happy together. Her father-in-law loves her as well. Like, you know, it's a happy existence. It's just the mother, and to an extent, the younger brother. The younger brother ends up in a little weasel. As soon as there's a challenge of any kind, he's like, no, just give her back. Like, tell her to get lost.
Well, it's the mother feels like she's sticking up more for the system as a whole. She believes in the Lord and, like, being able to follow his stuff. The brother feels more so of, like, the woman is not a real member of our family. He feels more like he's trying to defend his father and brother from having to go through the fight that he knows is coming, that all of them know is coming.
Yeah, because there's a great scene after they've been resisting for a while where the extended family all come to, like, have a meeting with them. And, like, they have her sit down in the middle of the room and the entire family's around. And it's all these, like, faces that we're not really seeing in the movie at this point because they're just here for this one scene. But they're like, hey, this is going to completely ruin the family if you don't just do what's been asked of you. Yeah. The family's name's going to be in the mud. They're probably going to come and fight whoever's resisting them. It's going to ruin the family. Like, are you willing for the... And she's not necessarily saying that she wants that to happen, but she's like, I don't want to go. I want to stay. And it really brings in this question of the individual person's wants, desires, and needs versus what the system's saying you have to do. And it's very interesting that, Isaburo is saying, no, like, I'm going to stick up for her because she's right. She shouldn't have to do this.
There's a sequence in between there that I think is just massively important to the entire story.
Yeah, go on.
first off, while they're questioning her, she says, not just, I don't want to go. She specifically says, I would rather die than go back there.
Yeah.
Like, she is laying that in the sand. She's saying, there's no way this is going to happen. I'm sticking around, or I'm leaving everything.
But notably, she's saying, I would rather die. I don't want the family to die for me not to go back there, but I would rather die than go back there.
Mm-hmm. But then the immediate follow-up sequence, once everyone departs, it's just Isaburo.
Which, by the way, just the shot that where this happens, all the extended family get up and walk out, and the shot just stays there until they're all gone, and it's just the 4 family members left, or the 5 maybe.
I think it's just the 3. It's just the father and then the married couple.
Oh yeah, because the younger brothers, and then the wife leaves as well. Yeah. But I think the wife actually leaves before all this extended family do, because she's angry and she she yells off at her. Yeah.
But this sequence is great because, they've had everything laid out. We all know what the consequences are across the board here. And maybe out of love, maybe out of desperation, whatever it is, Yogoro breaks for a second. He turns to his wife and says, like, you should go. It's not worth all this. And it's framed in a way that makes it seem like it is out of love, a thing where she says she'd rather die than go back, and he's just like, and again, I don't want you to die.
I want to jump in here with the way this is captured on the film, because it goes into these close-ups as they're looking at each other before he says it, and it feels like a big deal. It feels like a prominent moment. And then, of course, Isaburo says, F that, no. Right now, you two are promising me that you're never going to leave each other, because what you two have is great. The fact that you found each other and this was working out so well, and they're trying to take it away, is complete bullshit. And again, I'm paraphrasing here, obviously this was not how you phrased it. But it's like, no, you never leave him and you never leave her. You have to make that pact right now. And I love this idea that he's been so inspired by them finding happiness that he is going to fight for it. And I think what's so good about the build-up to things happening right in the third act, which is, there's this great series of shots where after they've sent the wife and the younger brother away, right, because they know battle's coming, and they've also stripped the house, which I guess could also be symbolic of them stripping away all of the decorum, all of the things we're supposed to have. They're just bare. But of course, there's a practical reason for it as well, which I love this line. So
I know it's funny.
The woman, I'll explain who this woman is in a second, but this woman comes in and says, you've moved all the mats on the floors, and he's like, yeah, well, they get quite slippy when there's blood on them.
Yeah.
that wasn't the exact line, but that was the reason. It was like...
they lay out the mats, and the woman's just like, oh, are those mats typically out this time of year? It's just like, oh, only in these special circumstances. See, they get slippery when there's blood on them. And the woman's just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, this woman is a woman who's sent to breastfeed Tommy when... Well, this is the other big plot point, is they kidnap, the Lord has his men kidnap, effectively, Ichi, by... The younger brother actually is a part of this, because he tricks her into leaving the house and going to where the Chamberlain is, and they basically don't let her go, and they say, hey, if you leave here, we'll make them commit seppuku. That's what their charge is going to be, unless you come willingly. So they take her by force. And I think one of the sort of the more like you won't break us kind of spirit of the movie is the fact that Isaburo immediately, well, almost immediately anyway, starts considering it a kidnapping. Like, this is what's happened. Yeah. You kidnapped her. You took her against her will, and that's what he threatens to tell everyone in Japan. He's like, no, I'm going to tell them all. Again,
it's there's a tiny sequence there where it's coming from the rival. It's coming from that frenemy, where he basically says, like, well, technically, you didn't give in to their order, and neither did she. This is kind of like the kidnapping of a high-ranking official's wife by the daimyo. If people heard about that, golly, that sure would be awful. Anyway, have a nice day.
Which, I think that character's interesting, because we know he kind of wants to have a fight, like he wants to actually prove himself in battle. It almost does kind of feel like he wants to raise the stakes until there is going to be a battle.
See, I agree, but also at the same point, a lot of this movie points to the fact that they're just friends. Like, as much as they are, everyone wants to see them fight because they are like the top two, but between the two of them, it feels like neither of them want that. Neither of them, they keep on going through all these peaceful means, and we never get that. Well, up until a certain point, we never get that fight between them. It feels like they are just trying to keep things peaceful. But
even when they do eventually fight, though, it's not out of hatred. It's like he's just still doing his job, and it's kind of like unfortunate they have to have this duel. But like it's not out of this thing where he's became a villain and now we hate him and we can't wait to see him get what's coming to him. He's not that character. He's
good right up to the last minute. Like there is no way to dislike this character right up until he bites it.
No, the Lord is the villain, and it's very intentional and by design that you barely see him. Like, he is the unknown force that is making these decisions that are affecting everyone's lives that they never even get to really see, Yeah.
So at this point, they send out another person or whatever who basically is trying to convince the son, like, hey, look, we know that they kidnapped your wife. Don't do anything. Just let it be. And you know what? Send a little message saying like, hey, please take her to the castle. Sorry that all happened. Have a nice day. But then Isaburo sends that guy away and says, don't worry. I'll convince him of that. No problem.
Well, actually, just to interject one detail here is that at least I got this vibe at this part of the movie is that because we've already had the conversation with was it Tatawaki, the friend character, who suggested, hey, they basically kidnapped her. I think the regime, as it were, I think they're aware that that's a possibility, and I think part of what they want here is they want Yogoro to say, hey, please take her. I am authorizing you taking her back to the castle and giving her to the Lord, because they want to make it official, because they know that they've technically done this in a shady, off-the-books kind of manner.
Yeah.
And I think they want that, because if they get that from him, then they have no story to tell. Yeah. There's no power anymore.
There's a like immediately after the sequence where he sends the guy away and says, don't worry, I'll convince him. We cut to these like chamberlains and stewards and whatnot, and they're all just sitting there talking to each other being like, whew, crisis averted, am I right? Jesus, that could have been awful.
It was actually a pretty funny scene. And Yogoro comes in with this message from his father, and they think this is going to be them giving the written words saying, yeah, you can take her, like we give her over willingly. Sort of retconning the fact that it was all done in this sort of shady manner.
Yep. And if you could just date that for like 3 days ago, that'd be great.
And instead, the guy opens the scroll and immediately starts looking mad and quickly reads it. And then we get to hear what it said, which is basically, you kidnapped her, this was dishonorable, and everyone in Japan is going to hear about it if you don't make this right. And of course that builds us up to them stripping the house, waiting for the bad guys to come, and prepping for a standoff.
At this point, it's basically Japanese Waco. It's just the Japanese like, we're going to bunker down, and when the federal government comes, we're going to make our stand.
And they just get surrounded at first, and they tell them, hey, your order's out to commit seppuku. And the main character basically just chuckles and like, yeah, all right, yeah, that's happening.
Well, I do like to see, because it's a powerful scene where he's just like, oh, seppuku, yeah, no, I pretty much saw that one coming, and the guy steps up and said, sure, we'll do seppuku, but first we want one teensy tiny little thing. We want the head of the chamberlain, the steward, and the lord. Have a nice day.
Yeah. It's a good moment. In fact, even just to go back to when they give them the message, one of those great track-in shots into a face is after they sort of like react to the message on the scroll. You get the track into Yogoro, because he was sort of bowing as if he's being, what's the word?
Obedient.
Obedient, yeah. But the camera tracks in as he sort of looks up as they're reading what it's actually saying, and it feels like it's like a big defiant kind of moment.
Yeah.
So then they bring in Ichi. And this is the thing. I think this is really important, is that when Ichi leaves and is like, we get the scene where they say, hey, if you don't come with us, we're going to make them commit seppuku. Once that scene happens, we don't see her again until this moment. So she feels missing from the movie, and that does a good job to make us feel like we're not seeing her as well, in the same way that the main characters are worried for her and are concerned. And, well, technically she's safe in the sense that no one's going to harm her because she's the mother of the heir to the throne, as it were.
Yeah.
obviously we're fighting for her freedom here. We're fighting for her because she doesn't want to be there. She's going to be miserable the whole time.
Going back to the Cold War, she is what's keeping the war cold. Like, as long as she's around, everyone's going to try to be civil and cool about this, because otherwise it's going to boil over.
Funny you mentioned that, David, because they're having this standoff, and then we get to the point where a couple of the guys working for the various lords' men, they point to spears at her, threatening her.
Yeah, it's after this. They basically, the steward has come in and has made the ultimatum saying, like, look, yes, you have made the official thing saying that you will never, ever give her back. Fine, whatever. But we found a loophole. If you renounce her or she renounces you, technically we can be good. So let's do that. How about you renounce her now? And both sides are obviously like, no, we're not going to renounce each other. We're family. Screw you.
Yeah. Basically, you say she's not really one of us, and we can all go home happy. They keep trying to find more ways to just not have the fight, and it's all about the will of the human spirit of these people saying, no, because you're just devaluing who we are, so we're not going to do that. We're not going to give this up. And ultimately, she makes the choice, Ichi makes the choice to grab one of the spears and stab herself with it, to take herself out of the equation. And what's really sad about this is that Yogoro just runs towards her as the fight starts, and he's so concerned with holding her that he just starts getting stabbed, like, randomly as he's holding her. Like, he's not fighting anyone, he's just holding her, and every so often a spear comes in and stabs him. And, Isaburo's fighting people, and he goes over and he basically sees his son die, and his daughter-in-law has just died as well. And this is a big part of the movie, because this is where he's like, okay, you know what? Now I'm going to fight. Like, before I was willing to fight, but now this is, like, I'm fighting for the memory of my son and my daughter. This is, I wouldn't say revenge, but now he's fighting for justice in a way that he wasn't before.
It goes back to that very first conversation about how the Swords Act, you play defense right up until the right moment, and then you switch over to offense. This is the moment when he was playing defensively the whole time. He was saying, no, if you're going to come attack me, I'll defend myself. But as soon as he loses his son and daughter, he switches over to offense and says, okay, I'm burning this mother to the ground.
It's so funny, because, like, so many action movies will start in the first act with having the hero lose someone or something that motivates what their path of, like, wrath is, if you want to call it that. And here we spend 90 minutes building up to the loss. Like, so we get all these reasons for why he's so invigorated by seeing his son and this woman be happy together. It's made him realize that life is worth something, that happiness is real, and then he sees it be killed in front of him, that this future generation that he was hoping would carry the world into a better place is already been dead. He's outlived them. So now he has no reason not to just fight, other than maybe to be a grandson or a grandfather to his daughter.
Yeah,
but
because the wet nurse was protecting the child the whole time, so Tony's fine.
Yeah, the steward, like, this also this particular sequence is him just going through the men to get to the steward. The steward tries to run away, but he kills him. It's very thrilling, all this stuff. It looks great. The way it's filmed is like, this pales in comparison to the stuff that comes at the very end in the field, because that stuff is just gorgeous. But this is really solid stuff.
There was also a sequence that I found interesting, kind of in the intermediate here, after the declaration of war, quote unquote, and before this scene. We cut to the samurai clan who brings in, I'm always going to forget his name, Tatsuya, I think it is. Brings in him and basically says, like, hey, we need you to go take care of your frenemy. We need you to go fight him. And Tatawaki's immediately like, I'm sorry, he's a criminal now, right? And it's like, yep. It's like, isn't that a job for, like, our guy who arrests people? That's not my job. I'm border control. Isn't that a job for the guy who arrests people? And he's trying to, again, work within the system, work within the rules, and kind of just play bureaucracy in order to not have to go after his friend here.
Of course, it was set up at the start that those two are the only people who might match each other. So they're trying to send the one man they think can beat him in a fight.
Yeah, exactly. But then he manages to get his way out of it. And he's like, look, if you want me to go fight him, I'll do it. But I need a promotion with, like, a significant raise in order to do that. And they're just like, dude, This is not the time. Whatever, screw you. We'll get other people. That is actually one thing that keeps coming up is the samurai clan. Everyone keeps on coming in, and especially like the higher ups are talking to Isaburo about, oh yeah, the Lord made you take in this woman and like it's awful or whatever. But they keep on pivoting it over to like money and like being able to get a raise or more like promotion or status or stuff like that. And Isaburo doesn't care about any of that. Like it's not important to him, but it seems like it's the only thing that this sort of clan cares about is how much money they're able to get in like payment, essentially.
Yeah. So he takes the baby and he's traveling. He wants to basically go after the Lord. He's traveling to the castle. And it comes to a head when he gets to kind of the outer perimeter, and there's like a passing, and this is the border control as it was mentioned earlier, where Tadawaki's kind of like, hey, I can't let you pass. Do you have your clan papers, or do you have like a paper that says you're visiting? And he's like,
it's basically like passport, please.
Yeah, I don't have that. So, but I have to get through. And just to show that they're still very amicable, it's like, no, they take the time together to put the kid down. Like, okay, let's go over and put the kid down somewhere safe, and then we'll have her fight. So, but the way this is captured, because there's so many samurai movies that have the slow build up when the two rivals are going to have their showdown, and we get those like very much the Western style shots of the, the over the shoulder as they're staring at each other kind of thing. But that ominous music, that eerie music from the start comes in again, and it really is this thing where they don't pull their swords for a while. They're sort of like darting towards each other with their swords still sheathed, and just kind of like, waiting for that right moment to pull out. And it's very quick once it actually happens. It's a very quick sort of swipe, and then it's like, oh no, he's already had the killing blow. But it's all very effective.
He being Isaburo.
Yes,
Isaburo
of course,
wins.
yes.
So there's, during that talk that they have, like they sit down and they feed the baby a little bit. And I absolutely love this sequence because essentially both of them know what's coming. As you said, they both know this fight is happening. But specifically Watataki, once he lays down the baby, Watataki just breaks all of the, like, he's always kept this sort of like, oh, it would be a shame if this happened, or oh, I'm working within the bureaucracy. He breaks all that down and just speaks to Isaburo as a friend and says, like, let me win this fight. Because we got two options here. Option A, you win, and then inevitably you will be killed. Like, there's no way you make it out of all of this alive. And if I win, I can take care of that baby. Like, I can make sure that it lives a healthy life at the very minimum here. But if you kill me, there's no guarantee of that. And Isaburo basically just says, like, sorry, man, I'm in too deep. I can't, from a moral standpoint, I cannot back down now.
I mean, again, just points out one of the whole big themes of the movie is that these two human beings clearly care about each other. And, like, there should be no reason why they don't just come to an understandable solution that works. But because of the system, they're about to have to fight. And that is going to happen because of that.
Because of the whims of a man who lives hundreds of miles away that has never met any of them, they have to fight. So
afterwards, though, there's gunshots. And the guns were set up earlier because when he was checking the inventory of weapons, he was holding some rifles at one point. So it's these, obviously, it's old musket style things, as they're ancient. But we see like these like sort of bushes that are kind of in this area, and the two gunmen kind of pop up and shoot. And this is a wonderfully shot sequence as well, because Isaburo sort of like rolls into the bushes, so he's also hidden now, and it's like, oh god, where is he? It's almost like he's a raptor in Jurassic Park. It's like, don't go in the tall grass kind of thing. And he just jumps out and slashes them, but there's more gunmen. And this sequence is basically him getting shot and then still going, and then he gets shot a second time.
He's trying to get back to the baby. Yeah. Like, that's the thing. He keeps yelling out for Tomy.
He gets shot a second time, a third time. I swear, he basically just muscles through the pain until the fifth or sixth shot. And at this point, he's got holes, he's got blood stains like in different spots all over his shirt. And he eventually starts to sort of like feel the pain and like fall to his feet or to his knees, and he starts crawling. And he's just like crawling, and he's sort of like close to the baby by this point, but not quite there. And he's yelling over at the baby. And it's like, yeah, we're not getting a happy ending here. He's not going to get to the castle and storm it and kill the Lord. Yeah. That's not what this movie is. The best you get here is that the woman who was sent in to look after the kid and breastfeed it is there to pick up the baby, and maybe this baby will grow up into a better future. But I think part of the reason why the start of the movie starts off with, hey, it's 1725, it also starts off by saying, hey, this system of lords lasted all the way up until whatever the year was, and it wasn't any time soon after 1725. It was like another 200 years or something like that.
Well, that's the thing that Tadawaki was saying, was not that, I if this news breaks out of the kidnapping happening, it's not that this lord specifically will go down. He implies like it's going to mess with the entire system. So when you see at the beginning there and you realize that the system was not interrupted, there wasn't anything like that, you already know in the back of your head, like, there is no way that he's going to get up there and manage to disrupt everything. He's not going to manage to topple the government, basically. You know this ends in some level of tragedy. But then the shot that I found the most powerful out of this, honestly, is he's, like you said, he's shot several times. He's still trying to muscle through. And then you see, I'll call it bamboo. I don't know what plant it actually was, but you see the heads of no less than like 30 gunmen come out of this bamboo grove. And it's like just the shot of specifically Isaburo and then the 30 gunmen ahead of him. And it's like, this is it. This is where he's finally going to bite it.
There's also like a sort of sequence in here, like a montage of all the people he's killed. And he's taken down a number of people. Like, it's actually he's went through as many as he possibly can. It's and I guess if there's one kind of maybe takeaway to on a happy side, is that he at least died believing in something and for fighting for something that he really believed in, which I don't think he had at the start of the movie. He at least was fighting for something here at the end, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You get this feeling in the beginning of this listlessness, this fact that he doesn't have anything, as you said earlier. And by the end of this, his dying words are crying out to Tomi saying, live like your mother and marry someone like your father, because they are like the best of us.
Yeah. So it's a tragedy, but it's a tragedy with the hope that one day it'll change. And it wasn't anytime soon, going by history, but it's very much this idea of that it was a long, slow process. So, yeah. I mean, I think it has depth. It has wonderful cinematography. It has so much time spent building up the characters and their motivations and their themes, as so when the action does kick off, there's so much weight behind it, and you're really rooting for him when he does start saying, you know what, no, I'm going to be John Wick, and I'm going to take out all these bastards. And the fact that he fails makes it more down to earth and realistic than John Wick could ever be, because it's like, no, he felt like John Wick, but realistically, he was only ever going to get so far. And that gives the ending the power that it kind of has. So,
because that's the thing that I always think about with these like hero going up against the system sort of stories, is that the hero only ever needs to fail once for it to not matter anymore. It only ever needs to be that single failure, and then it's just done. And obviously, just going by odds, no one is that lucky forever. No one manages to win them all. So the fact that he comes out of it and it's not a matter of him toppling the system, that was never the goal here. It was the goal of being able to find something worth living for and allowing it to survive. And the it in this case being Tomi. Yeah. So out of the two movies I watched this week that were about rebellions, this was definitely the better one. Yep. I mean, this isn't going out for a significant while after the fact, but
they can work it out.
Zack Snyder.
They can work it out from context.
Yeah.
They can work it out. Absolutely nuts. Anyway, it's funny actually. I was thinking more about Rebel Moon, sadly.
Why?
Yesterday, and just in the sense that I'm like, you know what? You know, we're talking about how Zack Snyder only knows how to do like characters who want to sacrifice themselves for their cause and all that. I was like, it's so funny that we just did Godzilla -1 recently, and it tackles that subject with a very different message ultimately than Zack Snyder could ever dream of. And I just thought, it's funny how we've sort of surrounded it with two Japanese movies in a recording order that both do much better jobs of tackling the subject and having hope. Even this one, which is got a tragic ending, undoubtedly has more hope and heart than anything he's ever done. So
absolutely,
yeah,
it's Zack Snyder not wanting to go into it, but it's this thing that he never gets of honor and actually fighting for something that is personally meaningful rather than just, wow, isn't that cool?
Yeah, anywho. So yes, if you didn't predict or guess it, we were recording this in the last week of December, but this is the February episode of
yes, I believe so.
Criterion Cut, yeah. All right, well, I guess it's time to rate the movie.
Yes, I suppose so. Like I said, I definitely did enjoy it. It is rife with symbolism. It is this like very close character story. I can't say that I really disliked much of anything, but I do think it was, I don't know, it was just a little bit shy of something like the Seven Samurai or Drunken Angel sort of stories from the Japanese, where it feels like there is this deeper connection with the characters. While I do think that these characters had a great story, I still felt like there was just this little bit of a barrier. I don't know how to best to describe it. There was just this little bit that was keeping me from like fully investing in all of the characters. The best one was Isaburo, but honestly, I put that more on how capable the actor is than anything that was
Mifune
actually like centered on.
Yeah, you know, he's great. Like he's You know, we're going to have many chances to talk about his performances. I think based on you know, just how many Kurosawa movies he's in, and you know whatever else.
Absolutely.
So,
but overall, I'd say score-wise, I'll give it a 8.5. It's really good. I do think it is just a little bit, like I said, shy of Seven Samurai and such. So 8.5 is where it sits for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you'd said anything less than an 8, I'd be saying what you're talking about. It's like it's clearly there's a level of absolute class here that is still there, even if it's not quite one of the best movies ever made that you're comparing it to. So, yeah, I think. I think I agree with 8.5. I was fighting between that and an 8, and I think after talking about it and how much we really talked how it built up to that final sequence and what everything is actually saying, I think it has to be the 8.5. Okay.
Now, obviously, for this show, even though it's moved to Patreon, we do still have the collection. Does it make the cut?
Well, the word "cut's" still in the title of the show, so that's true. That's fine. We can still cut. I mean, we still do it in extra reels, even though we argue we don't need to in that. But
yeah, but extra reels doesn't have any rules, so we can just do whatever we want.
I mean, obviously it makes the cut. I don't think that's. I think it makes the cut. I don't think it's a cut above. I think it joins Drunken Angel and The Magician and Chungking Express and that tier of excellent, but not the best ever movies from Criterion.
Yeah. I mean, even with your initial description, I've never seen Harikiri, but the fact that this is considered lesser than that for you,
yes,
even just slightly, I feel like that's kind of, by definition, it has to be more makes the cut than all the way up there, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I was comparing to a cut above movies, one would have to be better than the other.
True.
So it doesn't necessarily mean anything, but yeah, no, like I think it's particularly on Criterion Cut, like there has to be like almost a higher standard to get into the cut above, and you know, this is just. But I'll look at this, like I'm looking at the ratings we've given to everything, and we have never averaged below an 8.25. That is the level of which we are operating here for these movies. So
who would have thought Criterion Collection's actually pretty decent?
Who would have thought, indeed. I'm sure we'll get to Harikari at some point in the future, same with the Outlaw Samurai and everything else. There's so much good stuff to come. Speaking of which, next month is a very different movie, and I'll be curious to see how this ends up faring and how we end up rating it. But we're doing a comedy next month. We're doing a comedy that was released by the Criterion Collection, and that is It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. So, if you've ever seen Rat Race, that was basically a goofy remake of. It's the same premise.
Okay.
It's
I don't remember watching Rat Race, but I remember Rat Race coming out. So.
It's basically there's a prize in a different state all these different people have to get there via whatever means necessary to get to it first. But it's all these different subplots of comedy characters. But something different, I wanted to try and shake up, and so we weren't always doing the exact same type of movie. For example, the last Kurosawa movie we did, I specifically chose a non-samurai one because I knew we were doing a samurai movie with this vote. So
I was gonna say we've got to be careful with our samurai here because there's a lot of samurai.
There's a lot of samurai.
Criterion Cut.
So I'm trying to keep it to only one samurai every, say, half year kind of thing. Give or take,
Reasonable.
So, yeah. As a Man World is next time on Criterion Cut, so hopefully you look forward to that, guys. And hopefully you look forward to... it's a vote for the next extra reel, so I can't tell you what it's going to be, but...
But the one that just came out was I Am Here Now.
Oh, yeah, it was Neil Breen.
Yep.
It was Neil Breen, baby.
Great.
That wasn't the last one that just came out, was it? Oh, it was. You're right. Yeah. I'm looking a month ahead, sorry. Yeah.
You're good.
All right. The tie's coming off. It's the end of the show.
Oh, it couldn't even last the Patreon bit.
Yeah.
So close.
What Patreon bit?
That's right. We don't have to pitch
We're on
Patreon. I forgot that. I could have been cursing this whole time.
I'd be preaching to the choir. Literally.
Hold on. Let me just... Fuck. Okay. I'm good now. Wow. Beautiful.
I did my Superman thing.
I've actually been rewatching Twin Peaks recently.
Yeah.
Very good. And I've been watching it along with my girlfriend, and we got to like episode 3 where we first go into the White Lodge or the Black Lodge, whichever one it is.
Well, you don't know what it's called that at that point, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. And so at that point, my girlfriend's like, okay, let me just like talk this through and you tell me if I'm close. I'm like, I have no idea if you're close. I'll tell you if, like, basically you're around, but I have no idea.
I actually don't think that's either the White Lodge or the Black Lodge now I'm thinking about it.
Oh, it's not? All right, maybe I'm not close either.
No, I don't think you are close. Okay, it's been a while. I mean, technically it might be part of the White Lodge, but I don't think it is. I think it's like a separate...
Fair enough.
...entity, but yeah. Oh, so good, though. So good.
I appreciate it.
There's a big chunk of season 2 which is pretty rough, but it's worth...
Yeah, that's... When we go through it, I keep on debating whether or not we just stop at Lynch's last directed episode and then jump to the season finale, or if I go through the entire...
I don't know. As much as some of it's really bad, there is some stuff that's set up, at least in the few episodes building up to the finale, there's a lot of plot points built up that I think would feel weird. Like, there's an entire character you might care about in that finale that you wouldn't even know about if you just skipped to it. Oh,
that's right. Yeah.
So...
Yeah. Well, comments, let me know. Should I watch the entire back half of season 2 of Twin Peaks?
The answer's yes.
Or just skip it?
Yeah, no, the answer's yes. You should watch it.
All right.
You should watch it. And then the movie, and then season 3. Anyway, that's been Criterion Cut. Hopefully you enjoyed it, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for supporting the content. And we'll see you next month for It's a Mad World, and extra reels in a couple of weeks, and Columbo, and video game podcast, and bonus screams episodes, all these other things.
You get so much for your money. You're welcome.
You do. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Oh, and the words of Martin Scorsese. This is cinema.